Hello friends, my name is Tanveer. We'll be discussing the idea of patronage in relation to government's patronage in India after and before the independence. The Indian subcontinent in terms of patronage has a wonderful history. Patronage from centuries, Indian art was patronized by the kingdoms that ruled India. Before we come directly to the 20th century art's patronage in India and the role it played in promoting visual arts in India, we have to have a look back at the history of Indian patronage, at the history of patronage, at the history of art patronage in India. Now, looking back at the history of India is not an easy task. So we'll try to gather the glimpses from the history, highlighting some of the major contributions of the kingdoms that ruled India for several centuries, who patronized arts in order to promote culture, and who patronized and promoted art throughout with different agendas. Of course, the first to promote the culture, but at the same time to show their grandeur. The rulers in India have been successful. The rulers of India were successful in erecting monumental temple structures in the past. With the architectural monuments that were constructed during different rules in India, sculpture was an inherent part. To understand the dynamics of patronage, one can have the example of Ajanta and Ellora. Both these monumental architectural cave paintings and sculptures, sculpted and painted in these two World Heritage important sites of art, were not carved for merely a period of 2 or 3 years. But history and the historical data as well as the archaeological evidences suggest that the work that began at Ajanta continued for centuries. Similarly, it's not realistic to imagine that a structure like Ellora would have been erected overnight. It must have taken centuries and centuries for its construction, which must have included diverse patronage by different dynasties. Now, when we come down to the advent of Mughal Empire in India with the help of Akbar, when we come down to the Mughal Empire of India, where the patronage for architecture and painting is known to everybody. It's said that Mughals were great connoisseurs of art. In fact, the historical records tell us that in Akbar's court alone, there were 300 painters at work in a workshop. The monuments and structures, architectural essentially and sculptural as well, before the Mughals and during the Mughal reign in India, speak itself about the patronage that was given. Now, when we come to the 20th century, art, especially the modern art, the patronage, after the collapse of Mughal Empire in India, it needs to be mentioned here that the patronage had started dwindling during the reign of Aurangzeb. But with the advent of British Empire in India, the royal patronage collapsed entirely, and the artist, the painter, the sculptor, had to seek refuge in other feudal kingdoms across the country in order to sustain his daily life. This resulted in creating a number of schools known to us as Pahadi, Guler, Kullu, Manali, etc., etc. Now, after the collapse of feudal kingdoms in India, when British took over finally with the establishment of East India Company and the British Presidency, Indian art found no patronage. For obvious reasons that we have been discussing in relation with the modern art in India, that British didn't find the Indian idiom of painting or the Indian sensibility of aesthetics fitting within their purview of beauty, within the purview of their sensibility of art, within the idea of what art is all about. So there was a cultural hiatus, as I said in a previous module, for at least 200 years. What was happening is evident in the history that the artist of the times had a tough time. Now it is evident, as I suggested previously, that the patronage from a royal court comes with an agenda. First, to demonstrate the power and the wealth of the court. Second, to erect monuments in the memory of people who have ruled the country in order to remain relevant in the history and leave the trace after they are no more. With the advent of British colonial rule in India, art schools under the British Raj in various regions were established to propagate the ideas of Western classical art. Under the British Raj, patronage shifted from individual to institutional. Earlier, the patronage was institutional, which is to say that instead of patronizing an artist, British started establishing art schools in order to promote the art within the confines of the institution in a systematic way, laying down the curriculums of institutions that they built across the country, about which we have spoken in the earlier modules. Let's come quickly, without wasting time, to the idea of patronage in relation to the government and semi-government agencies in India before and after the independence. As I said, Western techniques were introduced to the educational institutes that were established by the British with an idea to inculcate Victorian idea of good taste among Indians. Under the British Raj, these European academic art schools were based on the idea of naturalism, which was major aspect of westernization of Indian values. Oil paintings and portraiture became popular, and hence, to meet the demand for portrait paintings of company officials and princely courts, English artists started coming to India. Kettle and George Wilson started working with the Nawab of our court. Theodore Jensen, commissioned by Travancore court, was later replaced by Raja Ravi Verma. The first Western art school was funded by Sir Charles Mallet, the British resident at Pune in 1798. This was closed after the sudden death of James Wells, who ran the school after him. Then the proper art school was established by Frederick Corbin on 1839, called as Calcutta Mechanics Institution. In 1850, another art school was started in Madras by a resident, Dr. Alexander Hunter. Dr. Alexander Hunter at his personal expense. His objectives were to humanize culture and improve the native taste through fine arts. The Calcutta Art School was very short-lived, though it was established in 1839. Then the permanent school was founded in 1854 by the Society of the Promotion of Industrial Art. Jamshedji Jijabai, a Parsi industrialist, one of the members of the selection committee for the Great Exhibition which took place in 1851, offered funds for the construction of an art school in Bombay. Though the art school opened in 1856, drawing lessons were started after a year. The above-mentioned school came about with the agendas like humanizing the culture and improvising the native tastes. These schools were established across the country in important centers like Lucknow, Kolkata, that time Calcutta, Bombay, Madras. Dr. Alexander Hunter of Madras also opened a school of industry to improve domestic articles. Now, here again, the concern is that people of the West, especially the Britishers, were establishing these schools with an agenda. These schools were functioning as industries to produce goods, traditional goods. The art schools were essentially established by the British to promote the notions of academic art in India. But apart from this, there were also industries of producing artifacts for their Western counterparts. Dr. Alexander Hunter of Madras School of Art opened a school of industry to improve domestic articles. Jamshedji Jijabai included painting as one of the subjects to improve arts and Indian taste. He believed that people of India would attain the degree of proficiency in painting, sculpture, and industrial arts under the proper guidance. The Calcutta School of Art came up with the development of originality to supply skills and draftsmanship to designers in order to promote taste and refinement in the arts. All these art schools went together to encourage the native taste with the introduction of Western art and its techniques. Hunter's Madras Art School workshops produced utility products like tiles, bricks, terracotta, ornaments, woodworks, metalwork, and jewelry. The pioneer teachers of these art schools like John Lockwood Kipling, Henry Hoover Locke, John Griffiths, and E.B. Hebel were trained in the West. Kipling, Locke, and Griffiths studied together. The curriculum of art schools, which included scientific drawing like freehand, memory, geometrical, and drawing from models, provided the framework for Indian students and artists. Life study and correct anatomy was taught from the antiques and plaster casts. In 1880, Kipling joined Mayo School of Art in Lahore and started the Journal of Indian Art and Industry subsequently in 1886. Griffiths, a friend and contemporary of Kipling, started painting the Indian subjects depicting the cultural diversity of India and Indians. A study of Ajanta paintings was one of the remarkable achievements among many other things. Figure drawing and the studies from antique casts were introduced along with geometrical and perspective drawings, paintings, and sculpture under Kipling and Griffiths. Hunter in Madras and Locke in Kolkata, that time Calcutta, introduced the use of antiques in drawing. The early students of Jamshedji Jijabai School of Art became prominent academics, academicians and artists, which included M.B. Dhurandhar, Pestonji Bowmanji, Abalal Rahiman, etc. These were all trained by Griffith in English art training. These were all tutored by Griffiths in Western academic style. The challenging task of these teachers was that of preserving the Indian decorations along with improving the techniques of Western academic naturalism in India. It is known fact that Bombay and Bengal were ideologically different from each other in terms of nationalism and art practices, but at the same time both of them tried hard to win the patronage in terms of commissions for historical murals, projects for the New Delhi Secretariat. Let's have a look at the murals that were commissioned by the British to the artists of Bengal and to the artists of Bombay. It's a well-known fact that Bombay and Bengal ideologically differed from each other in terms of nationalism and art practices, but both of them tried hard to win the patronage in terms of commissions for the historical mural project for New Delhi Secretariat and India House, London. The patronage of mural commissions also unfolded the relationship between Indian subjects and colonizers. Gladstone Solomon had a very crucial role to play when he was the principal of Sir J.J. School of Art, Bombay, between 1919 to 1936. Now, let's come to the murals which were commissioned for the New Delhi Secretariat. King George V announced to build Delhi as a new capital at his Delhi Darbar in 1911. Artists who were looking forward to decorate the public buildings for the new capital started looking for patronage. In 1912, Sir Edwin Landseer Lutyens, an eminent architect, was nominated by the Royal Institute of British Architects to prepare main urban plan. His nomination was immediately accepted by the Indian government. Edwin did not believe Indian architecture to be a great tradition and insisted on Western style. But the Viceroy, Lord Hardinge, wished to have indigenous elements in the architecture of Delhi in order to earn the imperial trusteeship. Therefore, the Indo-Saracenic architecture consisted of Western architecture and indigenous. A blend of the two motifs was preferred as the concept of partnership with the empire. Decoration part of the new capital was given to Indians, but the design and all-over control remained with Europeans. In 1930, Indian Society of Britain published a report on Indian traditional carvers, masons and builders. This report served as an encouragement given to the Indian decorative skills by the British government and their capital, New Delhi. A workshop for architectural decoration proposed by Percy Brown, principal of the Calcutta Art School, in 1912 to train the students for New Delhi murals was organized. E.B. Howell, the principal of Calcutta Art School, brought traditional muralists from Rajasthan to train his students with indigenous fresco techniques. During the Swadeshi movement in 1905, Sister Nivedita, one of the disciples of Vivekananda, proposed to decorate epic murals as modern temple to the nation. Finally, two government art schools of Bombay and Calcutta were selected to decorate new buildings with murals. Under the supervision of Gladstone Solomon, M.V. Dhurandhar was chosen for the task. Dhurandhar planned to work with his senior students to execute paintings to complete the work within the given deadline. After looking at his work, he was asked by Solomon to remove the familiar symbols from the figures so that they could not be identified as Hindu gods. The government held a competition for decorating the Imperial Secretariat, designed by Herbert Baker in 1927. In 1928, Dhurandhar, encouraged by his mentor Solomon, visited Delhi with his students to study the plan and elevations to get clear idea about the site to prepare pencil, watercolor, and oil sketches for the murals. In 1928, 50 lakh rupees were sanctioned, from which 1 lakh to be delivered, from which 1 lakh to be given. In 1928, 50 lakh rupees were sanctioned by the government for the execution of the murals, out of which 1 lakh was to be divided among the artists according to their contribution. Dhurandhar and his team was given the important murals with handsome amounts of fees. His theme was colonial justice. Now here again, the thematics were so cleverly constructed that they justified the colonial rule in India. When we go back to the history of patronization of art in India, as we learned, when we go back to the history of patronization of art in India, we'll see that this attitude was not something very new. The rulers, the dynasties, the kingdoms that had ruled India for centuries, as I said in the initial remarks in my lecture, as I said previously, if we look back at the history of patronization of art in India, the colonial mentality and attitude was no different. The rulers in the past, the dynasties, the families, the feudal lords who patronized arts in India had the same endeavors, had the same agendas. From the Hindu civil code, Sri Dhanam, which means by bridal wealth, and Data Vidhana, adoption, and from the Muslim law, last will and testament were selected to paint to celebrate the empire as an impartial supporter of law and justice. Now, it is ironical to say that British, who were instrumental in laying down the foundations of communalism, which ultimately divided this country into two, who were experts of divide and rule, which was their ultimate formula to continue their rule in India, were talking about and trying to communicate and attempting to justify the cultural as well as religious as well as social diversity of India with an overt demonstration using art as a tool for their own means. The students of Mayo School of Art in Lahore decorated the domes of North Conference Room by inscriptions taken from Quran and Buddhist postures. But the narrative murals were painted by Bombay artists. Rustam Siodia, trained at the Royal Academy, painted the four seasons. Different periods of Indian history were also depicted. Female figures were depicted personifying the themes of painting, music, dancing, architecture, poetry, and drama. Jagannath Ahivasi painted the model figures in the Rajasthani miniature style. The murals were inaugurated in 1931. The architect Baker felt that the murals would inspire the generations of Indians in future. But according to the Secretary to the Department of Industry and Labor, Baker was not very satisfied with the New Delhi murals. In 1924, another development shaped up. The government planned a display of the artifacts of the empire and contemporary Indian art in London as a great victory to their patronage of art in India. In 1924, the government planned a display of the artifacts of the empire and contemporary Indian art at London to demonstrate a great victory of their patronage in India. Majority of the artists who were invited for the exhibitions included Abhinendranath's students alongside O.C. Ganguly and Samrendranath Gupta, the two Orientalists. Solomon's students from the Indian Room of the Sir J.J. School of Art were also invited. Dhurandhar took 9 months to complete. The Indian art room, built of Malabar teak with painted ceiling, depicted the Surya and other 8 planets with decorative borders inspired by Ajanta painting. Solomon wanted frescoes to earn Bombay's reputation. His senior students executed 7 main oil panels of different dimensions. The sculptures, furniture, and carpets were contributed by various departments. The artists who dominated this exhibition hailed from Bombay, Madras, Lahore, and Calcutta. They included Dhurandhar, Pestonji Bowmanji, M.B. Pitawala, A.X. Trindade, Haldankar, among others, Thakur Singh, Allah Bakhsh, and A.R. Asgar of Punjab, Jamini Roy, Hemendranath Majumdar, and B.C. Law represented Calcutta with the members of Indian Academy of Art. The Orientalist Abhinendranath, Gaganendranath, Nandalal Bose, Sarda Okil, Asik Kumar Haldar, K. Venkatappa were included with Devi Prasad Rai Chaudhary, A.R. Choktai, Abdur Rahman Choktai, and Faizi Rahamin were also included from outside of Bengal. The Indian art section was extremely well covered by the press, and there were few articles that appeared in favor of Bengal's contribution in the famous Rupam magazine. The studio magazine invited O.C. Ganguly to write the review of the exhibition as well. This was an overview of the patronage by the British to promote, as I said earlier, their own notions of art, and also to some extent to boost the morale of Indian painter who was in search of an identity. After India gained independence in 1947 from the British, the task that was lying before the cultural elite as well as the government of India was to represent the independent India on the world cultural map with a specific and unique and at the same time individual identity of its own. To accomplish this task, National Gallery of Modern Art and Lalit Kala Academy, two premier institutes were set up in 1950s in order to promote modern and contemporary Indian art. The basic idea was to establish a Central Academy of Art and a National Gallery of Modern Art. The basic idea was proposed in an art conference in Kolkata, that time Calcutta, in 1949, to establish a Central Academy of Art and National Gallery of Modern Art in India. During this period, three art societies existed in India, namely Academy of Fine Arts in Calcutta, Bombay Art Society in Bombay, and All India Fine Arts and Crafts Society in Delhi, famously known as IFEX. Therefore, the matter was delayed to establish two more government institutions. In 1953, Government of India decided to set up a National Gallery of Modern Art and Central Academy of Art, that is Lalit Kala Academy. National Gallery of Modern Art, the NGMA, was inaugurated at Jaipur House, New Delhi on 1954, where Dr. Hermann Goetz, a German art historian and a celebrated scholar of Indian and Asian art, was appointed as a curator. In 1956, after initial planning and setting up of the gallery, Goetz handed over the charge to Mukul Dey. The purpose of the National Gallery of Modern Art was to promote, preserve, and document the modern and contemporary art. It was supposed to classify, it was meant to collect artworks from various centers across the country and preserve them and display them for the public, classifying each artwork according to its theme, its movement, and time. Lalit Kala Academy, New Delhi, was inaugurated on 5th August 1954 by the then Education Minister Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. It is an autonomous body fully funded by the Government of India. The purpose of academy was very clear, which was to provide facilities and training to develop the fine arts of the country. Initially, it was housed in Jaipur House in the same premises of NGMA. Later, it was shifted to Rabindra Bhavan in Mandi House in 1961. D.P. Rai Chaudhary was appointed as the first chairman and Barada Ukil as the secretary of the Academy. The annual National Exhibition program was started in 1955. The main purpose of the Academy was to encourage the research and study in the fields of painting, sculpture, printmaking, architecture, and photography, which also covered the areas of folk and tribal art with the broad perspective. One of the major aims of the Academy was to cover heritage and Indian culture and facilitate research on the Indian arts. The Academy's encouragement also included the international event which was first launched in 1968, known as Triennale India or Triennial India. The purpose of the motto of the Triennale was to look at the artistic practices across the country as well as across the world to generate a dialogue on the aspects of contemporary art practices. Besides the Central Lalit Kala Academy in Delhi, many other regional centers were established at many cities in India with a motto to promote the contemporary art across the nation. The other cultural as well as artistic centers that were established after the independence of India with a motto to promote art and culture on the regional level included the prominent Bharat Bhavan Bhopal and Jawahar Kala Kendra at Jaipur. Now, Bharat Bhavan was established with the help of Jagdish Swaminathan in Bhopal. Being a multi-art center, the purpose of Bharat Bhavan is to support arts including visual arts, tribal arts, folk arts, theatre and literary arts. It was established by Jagdish Swaminathan in 1983. With the establishment of Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, artist Jagdish Swaminathan raised an important question. And the question was whether contemporary or modern art and tribal and folk arts could be housed under one roof in one premises. The question initially sounds very simple, but it's not. When one goes into the depths of this question, one finds that it is a layered one. It's not an easy question. Here, Swaminathan is not only questioning the binaries of contemporary and tradition, but trying to shatter the colonial legacy which created the dichotomy between the contemporary and the tradition, labeling contemporary as something which is modern, which is happening right now, as innovative and could change with the passage of time, but tradition as something which is indestructible, unchanged, that has no innovation and is timeless. In summation, the history of patronage played a very crucial role in the development of visual arts and other arts in India. Art schools, academic realism and quest for nationalism, Bengal school and Orientalist debate, mural commissioning under the imperial government with the Indian and Western cultural partnership, imperial exhibition, etc. discussed here. In summation, we discussed the history of patronage that played a very crucial role in the development of arts in India, both pre and post the independence. Art schools, academic realism and the quest for nationalism, Bengal school and Orientalist debate, mural commissions under the imperial government with the Indian and Western cultural partnership, imperial exhibition, etc. These movements, these discussions would have never been possible had there been no patronage in place. We discussed these aspects in order to understand the changing purposes and agendas of patronage by different governments, and also the British colonialism in India in order to promote various political ideologies before and after the independence of India. Thank you.